13 black female legends whose beauty hid painful Hollywood stories. What if the women Hollywood praised for their beauty were also the ones it discarded the fastest? Behind the glamour, the headlines and the unforgettable performances were lives shaped by pressure, sacrifice, and painful silence. Tonight, Black Legends Revealed uncovers the hidden cost of fame behind some of the most captivating women in entertainment history. Subscribe now because these stories are far more tragic than most people ever realized. Mary Wells. Mary Wells had the kind of beauty that never needed to beg for attention. It was not loud, flashy, or overly dramatic. It was softer than that, fresh, elegant, and effortless. When she smiled, she seemed to light up the frame. When she stepped onto a stage, there was a natural polish in the way she carried herself, a quiet glamour that made her feel both classy and approachable at the same time. In the early 1960s, Mary became one of the first black female stars to project a truly modern image to mainstream America. Youthful, stylish, graceful, and completely self-possessed. She did not have to force sophistication. It seemed to follow her everywhere. That image matched her voice perfectly. Mary sang with a delicate warmth that drew people in, rather than overwhelming them. There was something irresistibly feminine in her sound, but also something steady and assured. That balance helped to make her one of the defining faces of early Motown. Songs like Two Lovers, You Beat Me to the Punch, and especially My Guy turned her into a sensation. But it was more than the hits that stayed with people. It was the total package, the smooth voice, the poised appearance, the sparkling presence, and the feeling that she represented a new kind of star. And tell me, how could audiences not fall in love with someone who seemed so radiant and so real at the same time? Yet Mary Wells's story is not only about charm and success, it is also about risk. At the height of her fame, she made the bold choice to leave Motown, hoping for greater control over her career and her future. It was a courageous move, but one that came at a painful cost. Without the full power of the label behind her, she never again reached the same commercial height. Later years brought struggle, disappointment, and illness. Still, Mary Wells remains unforgettable. She was not simply a beautiful singer from Motown's golden age. She was one of the women who gave the label its early shine, an artist whose grace, voice, and timeless appeal still feel luminous decades later. Joyce Bryant. Before America learned how to package glamour for television, Joyce Bryant was already creating a sensation in nightclubs across the country. She did not look or sound like anyone else of her era. With shimmering silver hair, figure-hugging gowns, and a stage presence that could stop a room cold, Bryant became one of the most striking performers of the late 1940s and early 1950s. Audiences first noticed the image, but they stayed for the voice, rich, fearless, and powerful enough to fill even the most demanding venues. At a time when black women were often boxed into limiting roles, Joyce Bryant projected confidence, mystery, and complete command. She was not simply appearing on stage, she was taking possession of it. Her journey made that rise even more remarkable. Born in Oakland, California, and raised in a strict religious household, Bryant grew up in an environment where secular entertainment was discouraged. Yet the very world she was expected to avoid became the place where she built her legend. After leaving home as a teenager, she began performing in Los Angeles and quickly developed a style that was impossible to ignore. Soon, she was earning extraordinary money, drawing packed crowds, and becoming one of the most talked about black female entertainers in America. She also stepped into spaces that had long resisted integration, proving that poise could be just as defiant as protest. But fame came with a darker side. The image that made her unforgettable also brought strained danger and deep unease. The pressure to remain provocative, the physical toll of maintaining her signature look, and the harsh realities of the nightclub circuit all began to weigh on her. So, let me ask you this. Would you leave at the very moment the world finally wanted more of you? Most stars would have pushed harder. Joyce Bryant did the opposite. At the height of her popularity, she walked away. In 1955, she chose faith over applause and stepped out of the spotlight when many believed she had only begun to rise. That decision transformed her from a glamorous sensation into something far more compelling, a woman determined to define herself on her own terms. Later, she studied classical music, returned to performance in a different form, and devoted part of her life to teaching. That is why Joyce Bryant still matters today. Her story is not only about beauty or celebrity, it is about courage, reinvention, and the rare strength to walk away before fame consumes everything. Florence Ballard. Florence Ballard had a beauty that felt vivid, self-assured, and impossible to shrink. She was not delicate in the way the industry often preferred its leading women to be. She had presence. In the earliest days of the Supremes, that mattered enormously. Before the gowns, the television appearances, and the polished Motown machine, Ballard helped give the group its original spark. Born in Detroit in 1943, she became part of the circle that formed the Primettes, the act that would later become the Supremes after signing with Motown. On stage, she brought a fuller energy, earthier, bolder, and more grounded than the image the public would later associate with the group. That contrast made her magnetic. When the Supremes exploded in the mid-1960s with songs like Where Did Our Love Go, Baby Love and Stop in the Name of Love, audiences saw glamour, precision, and extraordinary crossover appeal. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame materials still describe the group as beautiful, glamorous, and mature, and Ballard was part of that original visual force. She did not look like a background figure in her own story. She looked like someone who belonged at the center of it. But here is the painful question. What happens when the dream you helped build slowly stops making room for you? As Motown increasingly pushed Diana Ross to the front, Ballard's place inside the group became more fragile, and by 1967, she was replaced. That is what makes Florence Ballard's story so haunting. She was there at the creation of something historic, yet she lived long enough to feel herself being written out of it. After leaving the Supremes, she struggled to rebuild her career and faced severe personal and financial hardships. She died in Detroit on February 22, 1976, at only 32 years old. That age still feels shocking. Florence Ballard was not merely one of the women behind Motown glory. She was one of the faces that helped make that glory possible in the first place. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge did not merely look like a star. She carried herself with a kind of radiance that made Hollywood seem too small for her. In the 1950s, when the screen still offered black women painfully narrow spaces, Dandridge appeared with poise, softness, and a quiet fire that audiences instantly recognized. She had started performing young singing with her sister before growing into a nightclub and film presence of rare magnetism. But what made her so unforgettable was not only her face or her elegance. It was the feeling that she represented a future America had not yet learned how to accept. Her breakthrough came with Carmen Jones in 1954, the film that turned her into a historic figure. That performance earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress, making her the first black woman ever nominated in that category. It should have changed everything. It should have opened the floodgates. Instead, it exposed one of Hollywood's ugliest truths. The industry could celebrate a black woman for one extraordinary role and still refuse to imagine a full career for her afterward. Offers did not suddenly pour in. The system admired her, but it did not know what to do with her. And let me ask you this, how do you build a lasting legacy in a town that only wants you in small doses? That is what makes Dorothy Dandridge's life so startling. From the outside, she seemed to embody glamour at its highest level. Yet behind the camera, she faced a shrinking number of roles: intense racism, tabloid pressure, broken relationships, and growing financial distress. By the early 1960s, the woman who should have been leading major productions was instead fighting debt instability and personal heartbreak. Even her attempts to rebuild her career came too late to fully restore what the industry had taken from her. Dorothy Dandridge died in 1965 at only 42 years old, and that fact alone still feels shocking. A woman so luminous, so gifted, and so historically important should have been granted decades more work, respect, and protection than she received. That is why her story still hits so hard today. She was not simply beautiful. She was a breakthrough. Hollywood was proud to applaud, but never brave enough to truly support. Tammi Terrell. Tammi Terrell did not sing like a woman performing for the room. She sang like she was speaking directly to one heart at a time. That was her gift. When her voice joined Marvin Gaye's, the records felt less like studio creations and more like living conversations, warm, playful, intimate, and full of hope. By the late 1960s, she had become one of Motown's most cherished young stars, helping create classics such as Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Your Precious Love, and Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing. To the public, she seemed to embody youth, tenderness, and romantic joy. But that image hid one of the most painful stories in soul music history. Born Thomasina Winifred Montgomery in Philadelphia, Tammi had been working since her teens, recording before Motown ever recognized what it had in her. Once Berry Gordy signed her in 1965, everything accelerated. Her chemistry with Marvin Gaye was immediate and unforgettable, and together they became one of the label's defining pairings. What made Tammi so special was not just vocal skill, it was emotional clarity. She could make longing sound innocent, devotion sound effortless, and happiness sound completely believable. That is why listeners still feel close to her decades later. But here is the haunting question: how often does a voice so full of life belong to someone already living in the shadow of tragedy? The answer came on October 14, 1967, when Tammi collapsed into Marvin Gaye's arms during a performance in Virginia. Soon after, doctors discovered a malignant brain tumor. From that moment on, her life became a cycle of surgeries, pain, and interrupted hope. Motown still released songs connected to her name, and the records continued to sparkle. But behind them stood a young woman fighting for time she would never truly get back. She died on March 16, 1970, after multiple operations at just 24 years old. That is why Tammi Terrell remains so unforgettable. She left no long final chapter, no mature comeback, no chance to grow old in front of her audience. What she left instead was something more fragile, and in some ways more powerful songs, overflowing with light, made by a woman whose own future was slipping away far too fast. Once you know that her music never sounds quite the same again. Barbara McNair. Barbara McNair had the kind of beauty that television could not ignore. She looked refined, without seeming distant, glamorous, without feeling cold. There was a sleek elegance in her face, her posture, and the way she carried herself that made her seem born for the camera. In an era when black women were still denied full visibility in mainstream entertainment, McNair projected sophistication, warmth, and quiet sensuality all at once. She did not need to overplay anything. Her allure came from control. When she sang, there was polish. When she appeared on screen, there was poise. She felt like the future arriving early. That striking image was matched by genuine talent. Born in Chicago in 1934, McNair began as a singer on the nightclub circuit before expanding into Broadway film and television. By the 1960s, she was appearing on major national programs and becoming one of the most visible black female entertainers in America. She later headlined The Barbara McNair Show, making her one of the very few black women of that time to lead a nationally syndicated variety series. That mattered because she was not simply beautiful decoration in someone else's production. She was the attraction, the voice, and the center of attention. But here is the twist. How often does a woman seem to have everything the industry claims to want, yet still remain frighteningly easy to discard? That question makes her story so compelling. In 1972, McNair was arrested after signing for a package delivered to her home that contained heroin. She maintained that she had no idea what was inside, and the charges against her were later dropped after her husband, Rick Manzi, was charged instead. Even so, the damage to her image was immediate. Years later, she also endured financial strain and a long battle with throat cancer before dying in 2007 at age 72. That is why Barbara McNair lingers in memory. She was not just lovely, she was elegance under pressure, and a woman whose brilliance deserved a steadier spotlight. Marpessa Dawn. Marpessa Dawn had a kind of beauty that felt almost otherworldly. She did not project the polished all-American glamour Hollywood usually sold in that era. Her appeal was softer, more mysterious, and somehow even more unforgettable. With luminous features, expressive eyes, and a calm, screen presence that made every close-up feel intimate, Dawn seemed less like a manufactured star and more like a woman the camera simply fell in love with. That is exactly what happened in Black Orpheus. Born in Pittsburgh in 1934 and later building her life in Europe, Dawn arrived at international fame through a single role that made her unforgettable to audiences around the world. In 1959, she played Eurydice in Black Orpheus, the film that transformed the Greek myth into a tragic love story set during Carnival in Rio de Janeiro. Dawn's performance gave the movie its emotional center. She was not loud, flashy, or oversized. She drew viewers in through grace, vulnerability, and a face that seemed to carry innocence and sorrow at the same time. The film went on to win the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and later the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, turning Dawn into a global symbol of elegance almost overnight. But here is the twist: what happens when one beautiful performance becomes so iconic that the rest of your career can never fully escape it? That was the paradox she had to live with. That is what makes Marpessa Dawn's story so compelling. She had the kind of screen image that should have led to a far bigger career. Yet Hollywood never truly knew how to place her. Instead of becoming a major American star, she remained largely in Europe, working in theater, television, and smaller productions, including the long-running stage comedy Chérie Noire. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was too singular for an industry that preferred simpler categories. Dawn died in Paris in 2008 at age 74, reportedly of a heart attack. Today, she remains one of those rare women whose image still lingers long after the credits fade. Proof that sometimes one performance can make a face immortal. Gloria Hendry. Gloria Hendry had the kind of beauty that did not ask permission to be noticed. It was athletic, poised, and vividly modern. She did not fit the fragile mold Hollywood had long preferred for women on screen. Instead, she brought a sharper kind of allure, confident eyes, sculpted features, and a physical presence that suggested strength as much as glamour. That combination made her unforgettable. Before she became a film face, Hendry worked as a model, and you can feel that polish in the way she carried herself on screen. She did not just wear fashion well, she made it look like part of her power. Her breakthrough came in the early 1970s, when American cinema was beginning to make more room for Black women who looked self-possessed, stylish, and dangerous in the best possible way. In Live and Let Die, in 1973, Hendry played Rosie Carver, opposite Roger Moore, placing her inside one of the most recognizable franchises in the world. She also appeared in films such as Black Caesar, Hell Up in Harlem, and Black Belt Jones, becoming one of the faces associated with that era's tougher, more kinetic screen energy. What made her so compelling was that she never looked like scenery. Even in genre films built around action, Hendry carried herself like someone the camera could not afford to ignore. But tell me this: how often does a woman have the face, the style, and the screen command to become iconic yet still not receive the full legacy she deserves? That is why Gloria Hendry remains such a fascinating figure. She represented a different kind of beauty, one tied not only to elegance, but to confidence, movement, and presence. She helped expand what mainstream audiences could imagine when they pictured a glamorous Black woman on screen. And even though Hollywood never fully built a lasting star vehicle around her, her image still lingers. Some women are remembered because an industry protected them. Gloria Hendry is remembered because she was strong enough to leave a mark without that protection. Vonetta McGee. Vonetta McGee had a beauty that felt intelligent before it felt decorative. Her face was refined, her gaze steady, and her screen presence carried a kind of quiet authority that made her stand out even in films built around danger, speed, and spectacle. She was striking, but never fragile. There was thought behind the glamour. In the 1970s, when many actresses were reduced to surface appeal, McGee projected something richer elegance with steel underneath. That is why she stayed in people's minds. She did not look like a fantasy shaped only for the camera. She looked like a woman fully aware of the power the camera had given her. Born in San Francisco in 1945, McGee first studied pre-law at San Francisco State before moving toward acting, eventually appearing in Sergio Corbucci's The Great Silence, and then becoming one of the most recognizable faces of the black film era. Audiences saw her in Blackula Hammershaft, In Africa, Detroit, 9000, and Thomasine and Bushrod, where she brought warmth, dignity, and sensuality without ever seeming shallow. Even when the material around her leaned more sensational, McGee had a way of making every scene feel more grounded, more human, and far more memorable. But here is the real surprise. How often does a woman this beautiful also seem this self-possessed? That quality made her different. McGee later pushed back on the blaxploitation label itself, preferring to think in terms of black film, rather than a limiting category which reveals how sharply she understood the world she was working in. She wanted more than visibility, she wanted substance. Hollywood never fully built a major mainstream legacy around her, yet her image still endures because it carried both allure and depth. When she died in 2010, at age 65, it felt like the loss of a woman whose full value had never been measured properly. Vonetta McGee was not simply another beautiful actress of the era. She was one of the few who could make beauty look thoughtful, sensuality look dignified, and screen presence feel almost effortless. Tamara Dobson. Tamara Dobson had the kind of beauty that did not blend into a room, it reorganized it. She was statuesque, commanding, and unforgettable, with a look that combined runway elegance and pure screen power. At 6 feet 2 inches, she did not fit the delicate mold Hollywood had long reserved for women. She shattered it. What made her so striking was not only her height, but the way she carried it with sleek confidence, fierce composure, and a sense of style that made her seem larger than life. Even before she spoke. Before film audiences knew her name, she had already built a modeling career, appearing for major fashion and beauty brands, and developing the polished image that would later make her a cinematic icon. That image found its perfect vehicle in Cleopatra Jones. In 1973, Dobson stepped into the title role and instantly became one of the boldest black female action stars of the decade. Cleopatra was glamorous, intelligent, stylish, and physically formidable, a government agent who looked like a fashion editorial and moved like a force of nature. The film's own marketing leaned into Dobson's extraordinary presence, and audiences responded because she represented something rare, a black woman who was not merely beautiful on screen, but visibly powerful. And tell me this, how could anyone forget a woman who looked that elegant while taking complete control of the story? The success of the first film led to a sequel in 1975, further cementing her place in pop culture. But that is also what makes her story bittersweet. Once the blaxploitation era faded, Hollywood never truly built a second great chapter around her. The woman who had seemed born for a larger career was left with far fewer opportunities than her presence deserved. In 2000, Dobson was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and she died in Baltimore in 2006 at age 59 from complications of pneumonia and the disease. Still, her image endures. Tamara Dobson was not simply beautiful. She was majestic, magnetic, and one of the few women of her era who made power itself look glamorous. Brenda Sykes. Brenda Sykes had the kind of beauty that felt effortless at first glance and far more dangerous the longer you looked. She did not have the icy polish of a distant movie goddess. Her appeal was warmer, softer, and more immediate, luminous skin, expressive eyes, and a presence that could shift from innocent to knowing in a single close-up. In the early 1970s, that made her unforgettable. She looked like the sort of woman Hollywood loved to put on posters, but there was something more alive in her screen image than simple decoration. Even before her biggest film roles, Sykes was already drawing attention after being discovered through The Dating Game, a beginning that sounds almost playful until you realize how quickly that visibility pushed her into a brutal industry built on appearances. What made Brenda especially compelling was how naturally she fit the era's changing idea of black femininity on screen. Raised in Los Angeles and trained after encouragement from producer Aaron Spelling, she moved into film and television with a look that could sell glamour, but a presence that hinted at greater depth. She appeared in Black Gun Cleopatra Jones Mandingo and television series, including Ozzy's Girls and Good Times. In each setting, she carried herself with a mix of sensuality and control that made audiences notice her immediately. But here is the question: how often does a woman have the face Hollywood wants, yet still know she deserves better than the roles it keeps offering? That tension sits at the center of her story. That is why Brenda Sykes lingers in memory. She rose during a period that gave black actresses more visibility, but not always more dignity. Her beauty opened doors, yet many of those doors led to parts shaped more by fantasy than complexity. By the late 1970s, she stepped away from acting, later marrying Gil Scott-Heron and building a quieter life outside the spotlight. Perhaps that is the most surprising part of all. Brenda Sykes did not burn out on screen. She walked away with her mystique intact. And that may be why she still feels so intriguing today. Sheila Guyse. Sheila Guyse had a beauty that felt quietly dangerous, the kind that could look innocent in one photograph and deeply knowing in the next. She did not radiate the hard glamour of a nightclub siren or the towering authority of an action star. Her appeal was gentler, more inviting, and more elusive. That is why audiences in the 1940s and 1950s responded to her strongly. Born Etta Drusille Guyse in Mississippi in 1925, she later moved to New York, found opportunities near Harlem's scene, and built a career across stage, film, and television. What made Sheila memorable was the balance she carried. She could seem like the girl next door, then suddenly reveal polished confidence and theatrical pull. That quality served her well in all-black independent films such as Boy, What a Girl, Sepia Cinderella, and Miracle in Harlem, where her screen image mixed sweetness with style. She also proved she belonged on bigger stages, appearing on Broadway in Memphis-bound Lost in the Stars and Finian's Rainbow. Lost in the Stars became the prestige title in her story, placing her inside one of the era's most respected productions. But tell me this, how many women this lovely also had the talent to move from race films to Broadway without losing identity? That is what makes Sheila Guyse intriguing today. She looked like someone Hollywood could have turned into a household name, yet history left her in the margins. Health problems interrupted her momentum, and later comeback efforts never fully restored the career she might have had. She died in Honolulu in 2013 at 88. Still, Sheila Guyse remains unforgettable because her beauty never felt empty. It came with warmth, versatility, and enough mystery to make you wonder how much bigger her legacy should have been. Were these women truly celebrated for their talent, or simply admired for their beauty until the industry found someone new? That question still lingers. Each of these icons carried grace, power, and unforgettable presence, yet many were denied the lasting respect their brilliance deserved. Some were pushed aside, some were misunderstood, and some were gone far too soon. But their stories still matter, and their legacies still speak. So now we want to hear from you. Which of these women deserved far more recognition than history gave her? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Black Legends Revealed.